there's a natural kind of push you into, out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
and get you in front of more people, speaking to investors, having conviction and views. And so that also, I think, has like really stretched me and kind of transformed the way that I can kind of do things in my day-to-day
Yeah.
job that I didn't really think was going to be possible for me 5 years ago.
Welcome to Off the Desk on Tradeweb, the podcast where we step away from the desk to engage in insightful conversations with some of the most influential players in financial markets. I'm Amanda Miato, Managing Director at Tradeweb, where I lead the U.S. Institutional Rates Sales Team, and I'll be your host for today's episode. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Jenny Zhao, Managing Director and Global Head of Rates Trading at BlackRock's Trading Group. Jenny, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
For our listeners today, we figured that we could structure the conversation around three main topics. So first, we want to hear about kind of you and your career trajectory. Then we're going to shift it over to the markets and specifically focus on U.S. Treasuries.
Great.
And then we really want to hear from you about BlackRock and any kind of advice, tips, and how you're doing recruiting at BlackRock. So just for everyone to kind of have an idea of what's ahead.
Sounds great.
Okay. So if we dive right in, really just starting with your impressive career trajectory, it's really quite amazing in your role. What initially drew you into fixed income? Like, how did you get into the space?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because my answer is nothing particularly drew me to fixed income. I was good at math as a kid. I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I think when you go there, you end up doing something in finance. I ended up in Barclays doing rate sales there. But really, the only reason I picked that team was because of the manager there and the team culture that I saw when I interned for that summer. But there wasn't anything specific to like bond math,
Right.
that really drew me in.
Right.
It was really about the people.
Yeah.
And I think about the intensity of the floor, the teamwork and camaraderie that I saw day in and day out. And then, of course, there was a decent amount of bond math and macroeconomic data, fundamentals, that kind of stuff was interesting too.
Yeah.
But the core of it was a team, which is, I think, a weird answer maybe.
No, I think like maybe not many people set out to just go into fixed income. Like if you majored in finance and obviously a really prestigious university, you're like, all right, what are your options? And people start looking at sales and trading and banking and that world. But, it's always good to hear because sometimes you also hear people who maybe had like a philosophy major and they just made their way in.
That's
so
right.
I'm sure you cross paths with people of all different backgrounds.
100%.
So we love to hear that. But so you said you had started off on the sell side in sales.
That's right.
And now obviously being in the seat at the buy side at a major firm, running the team.
Yeah.
Would love to kind of get your picture or at least feedback on how's the shift from sell side to buy side? How has that shaped you as kind of a manager and past trader? And you still trade today, but like all those things together is like really unique.
Well, it's interesting because even on the sell side, I moved between 3 different firms. And sometimes I really envy people that I've seen kind of grow up at the same firm and spend their entire careers there because I think you build a lot of goodwill and you just have a lot of innate relationships from having done that. I ended up moving a lot, again, mostly driven by people, like managers that really kind of spoke to me, teams that spoke to me and kind of doing that over and over. And going through the sell side and the buy side specifically has taught me the importance of building relationships over time because I didn't get to kind of rely on knowing people ever since I was, first-year analyst. And now coming to BlackRock as a client and managing, a rates trading desk and relying on those relationships, it's taught me a lot of being honest and fair and consistent is super important in this industry.
Right.
Because most of our counterparts that I'm talking to day in and day out now, many of them I've worked with at prior firms before.
Right.
And so really understanding the importance of relationships and trust, I think is really critical in this industry. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned from having done the sell side and the buy side. Both industries are really interesting and very different kind of cultures, even within the sell side of different banks. But I think all of those experiences have helped me kind of get to the place I am today. So I kind of appreciate all of it.
Yeah, no, it shapes a lot of who you are as a person and a manager and like what you want to take with you, I'm sure, as a part of your own team culture.
That's right.
Um, as far as kind of looking back at maybe your own personal transformation,
Hmm.
were there particular, challenges or, stories you're comfortable sharing that really was a reflection point on you and like, hey, this is how I'm going to move forward in my career. Like, this is how I want to be. Maybe I've learned something up until this point, but,
Yeah.
going forward, this was a change for me.
Yeah. Well, one is definitely when I was at Deutsche Bank, I ended up working for a person named Andrew Haynes, and he and I ended up being together at multiple firms actually over many years. And his management style really taught me a lot about how I wanted to be as a
Yeah.
manager. I think it's informed a lot of my style since. But the other really, I think, big transformation in my career, honestly, has been coming to BlackRock.
Hmm.
So specifically, I think when you're on the sell side and I was a rate salesperson, so I also only did one job for 11 years. I was a deep subject matter expert
Hmm.
in one asset class in one region, and my career path looked very vertical. Like that's all I was going to
Hmm.
do was just get more and more senior
Right.
within rate sales. That's
Right.
what I thought anyway.
Right.
And I think when you get to a place like BlackRock, you learn one, you're just immediately exposed to so many different asset classes. Our daily calls cross everything from equities to credit to rates. There is no being solely a subject matter
Right.
expert in one thing. It also was a great learning opportunity for me from a kind of product sales, asset management industry perspective. Like I wasn't as well versed in it until I got to BlackRock, which
Hmm.
makes
Hmm.
sense. But then last but not least, I'd say even just core skills. So um, no one believes me anymore when I say this, but used to hate public speaking. Like
Yeah.
this situation
Oh.
would have terrified me.
Yeah.
But BlackRock is a place where I don't think they force you, but there's a natural kind of push you into, out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
and get you in front of more people, speaking to investors, having conviction and views. And so that also, I think, has like really stretched me and kind of transformed the way that I can kind of do things in my day-to-day
Yeah.
job that I didn't really think was going to be
Was
possible for me 5 years ago.
right.
So I very much value the firm for having given me that kind of growth.
Right. Right. And that's fast, like to see that kind of grow, right? Like saying if you didn't want to, or maybe not as comfortable doing this just a
Yeah.
few years ago, and it's such a big
Mm-hmm.
part of your job,
Sure.
wanted to shift over to the market.
Yeah.
What a world we
I
live in
know.
today.
Yeah.
Speaking more specifically on US Treasuries and
Yeah.
what's going on with the landscape today, it's obviously a critical part of the global economy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sets the tone for a lot of other markets. How would you briefly explain like the state of the market and affairs as it pertains to US Treasuries today, pre-election, like where are we at? What's the backdrop?
Yeah. Well, that's quite a question.
Mhm.
Um, I think what's pretty interesting about this year is that we've now really settled into this very local range, really after the Fed cut, for the first time this cycle, 50 basis points, pretty landmark event. And now we're kind of seeing what will happen with economic data, geopolitical risk kind of globally to kind of inform the direction of travel for interest rates going into the rest of the year. So right now we're right around 375 on 10-year
Mhm.
notes. We'll see what happens to really knock us out of this range one way or another. But I'd say typically, if we're going into a cutting cycle, and there's a lot of, I would say, divergence in opinions and how
Yeah.
much the Fed really needs to cut, if at all anymore. Like the story and the narrative shifts so quickly day in and
Mhm.
day out. But the Fed has started a cutting cycle. They want to cut. They want to achieve a soft landing. Usually, in those situations, the right thing to do is move out of cash. There's still a lot of money in cash and go and extend out the curve and buy duration, buy spread product. And we at BlackRock think that's going to happen. We
Mhm.
tend to like the belly of the Treasury curve. That's kind of a top of house view. But I think we're going to continue to see good inflows into both fixed income and equities, and we're going to see cash come out and get put to work because no matter if you think it's right or wrong, I think the Fed, in and of themselves, want to continue to cut.
Right.
So I think that's going to be the next direction of
Right.
travel. The other kind of big story in treasury markets long term is really the fiscal story, I'd say, globally, right?
Mhm.
So there's just a lot more supply of bonds
Right.
today than there have been before, and the trajectory for that is only higher.
Right.
And so that's something that I think we all have to contend with. Um, that typically indicates a steeper treasury curve, so higher yields in the back end of the curve versus the front end of the curve, more term premium, things like that.
Right.
So we'll see how that all kind of plays out over time. From a trading perspective, it also increases complexity because there are more auctions, right? So we have auctions almost every day. We have treasury buybacks now, which are, a newer thing directly from the treasury. And we have a lot more CUSIPs than we ever had to contend with before.
Right.
And so all of that, I think, kind of feeds into greater complexity for traders
Yeah.
and market participants.
Right.
And that's something we think about a lot on our desk as we think about how we plan going forward.
Right. So you touched on, obviously, the environment with geopolitical and, heightened sensitivity around everything that's happening around the world. Election is coming.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy. Is there anything that your team does to prepare? Because like you said, things are moving so fast. Like it could be by the hour, there's another piece of news that maybe is changing the team's view.
Yeah.
Like what's the rigor around like how your team's prepared and kind of keeps a moving target, like focused?
Yeah. I think, one of the silver linings of the last 5 years is anyone who's been in it for the last 5 years has really just seen a tremendous amount of market regime change, market volatility. And so COVID was probably not the most pleasant thing for any of us to go through. But if you were trading in that environment, you've learned so much about market functioning in extremely illiquid situations in that short window of time.
Right.
Happened again with SVB, happened in the UK with the gilt crisis.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of experience that people have today to help them with uncertainty going forward. We have a lot of preliminary communication with portfolio managers around what to expect. And so I think there isn't that much that phases us anymore, knock on wood.
No, it's true. You've seen a lot.
But and everyone has. So I
Yeah.
think that's all given everyone. There's no way to get rid of the uncertainty that exists in markets every day.
Right.
That's part of the joy of the job, I think.
Totally.
And I think everyone should feel good about hopefully having learned a lot from the experiences we've had the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think that's well said, and obviously it's not for a lack of events, right?
know.
Like there's tons of stuff to reference. Same thing at TradeWeb, like learning what do we need to do on our end to be prepared for so much uncertainty. But it just feels like even probably before COVID that it was just a longer period of calm.
Yep. Oh,
and
100%.
right, I feel like even speaking to clients at other firms that have had a long career in fixed income, or like the next generation of traders, like the newer traders, up until COVID hadn't seen anything
100%.
that was really like giving any disruption in the
That's right.
market.
Yeah.
But now they're
they've
on
seen
the
it-
top of their game.
That's right. They've seen a lot.
Yeah.
And so hopefully they've taken, it's actually, I think folks should be grateful because it's so much experience and
Right.
information in a
Right.
short window. Probably didn't feel great at the time going through all of that
Yeah.
volatility, but you're just so much prepared now
Right.
for whatever comes at you next.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. Crystal ball. Can you tell us where do you see the next 12 to 18 months the market evolving?
Yeah. Well, so I think that we've seen a lot of electronification, obviously, of fixed income markets, definitely rates markets over the last 10, 15 years. And I think we still have a lot of that left to do.
Right.
I think there's been some really interesting convergences of execution methodologies that have come out in fixed income, but specifically credit really has had a transformative year this year with the growth of PTs.
Right.
You guys are one of the market leaders in that. And I think for folks who are trading today, it'll be really important to understand and know all the execution methodologies now available to you. These are things that like everyone should know and understand as a piece of the toolbox that they have
Right.
in varying liquidity environments, regimes, and knowing when to use all of those tools. So I think, looking out 12 to 18 months, I'm sure we're going to continue to build greater and greater kind of execution pathways
Yeah.
that deliver better performance, better access, better consistency of outcomes when we're trying to access the market.
Right.
That's probably going to be in rates and credit,
Definitely.
munis. Like I think the entire fixed income landscape is going to continue to evolve that way.
Right.
And by the way, the growth of fixed income ETFs, which we're a big part of, obviously,
right.
that's also going to continue to move the market forward
Right.
from a velocity of trading that's increasing,
Mm-hmm.
which is just going to require even more ability to scale, which is like a
Yeah,
big thing for us.
totally. I think just learning from the different asset classes, like obviously within your own firm, within
Yeah.
our firm, like we're trying to take pages out of the other playbooks. Like, what did we learn from credit PT, right? We're talking
Mm-hmm.
actually right now about like how do we do that, across the board in rates,
Yeah.
treasury specifically. And now you would think that we're kind of at the inflection point of like the velocity of change will happen even quicker than it's ever
100%.
happened. Okay, I wanted to shift kind of to our last topic, and I know a lot of listeners would want to hear this, especially from you.
Okay.
Recruitment and the evolving talent pool, especially in
Yeah.
a seat like yours where you're, I'm sure, very involved in how you guys are hiring for your desk. You manage a large global team. What are the key skills that you're looking for today versus maybe what those skills could have been when you first started in the industry?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because one, at BlackRock, we talk about talent all the time. And it's actually really wonderful, I think, the amount of time that gets allocated by the most senior leaders down to kind of people managers
Mm-hmm.
around building and managing talent. What I would say specifically for rates traders, and maybe just all traders right now, is really just, I would say, passion for markets is like my
Mm-hmm.
biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that, you know, I want people who want to sit on the desk and talk about what's going on with the Fed,
Right.
what's going on in geopolitical risk currently globally. Um, how are we positioning for that?
Mm-hmm.
Having views on the market. So I think that's kind of for me the core. You can be the best coder in the world, you could be the best math guru, but if you don't actually like
Yeah.
markets, it's not the best seat for you.
Right.
So that's one. And that's true, I think, when I started in the industry too.
Right.
Hopefully, it was passion for
Right.
markets. And so that's one. The other I would say is coding. Like that's
Yeah.
a big one now for the newer talent coming in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Is not only coding from the sense of being able to build code and solutions for us, but I would say it's a mindset. It's like understanding logical steps in a
Mm-hmm.
process and being able to implement them. That's like very important for us in
Yeah.
trading in particular, I'd
Yeah.
say. So coding is one that I definitely look for. But in the end, across our desk, we have a lot of different kind of, we call them scopes of role at BlackRock,
Mm-hmm.
but we have a lot of different kind of responsibilities that people have.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are really deep into being a subject matter expert in a very specific piece of the rate
Mm-hmm.
space, like swaptions.
Right.
And that's a core kind of focus for them. And so the skill set there is really subject matter expertise
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
derivatives.
Right.
But then there are others that we have on our team that are much more focused on platform development and scale, building out more electronic tools in partnership with our vendors,
Mm-hmm.
improving our workflows. And so even within our global rates team,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different paths people can take.
Right.
And so the skill set needed for all of those is a bit different too.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are also different ways to grow in your career. So you might start out being a subject matter expert in futures
Mm-hmm.
trading and then decide, wait, I really want to work on how to evolve BlackRock forward for global futures trading, not
Mm-hmm.
just rates
Right.
futures, right? So there's a bunch of interesting directions that can
Paths you could
take.
take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you put it. Actually, I've never really heard someone articulate or take it further on the coding skill set. So you hear that a lot, that obviously people are looking to talent who have coding skills. But the second part where you spoke about, it shows that they're having a certain way of thinking, of a path of logic. And that's
100%.
kind of like a test to like, okay, how does their brain work? How
Yeah.
does this, and that's really thoughtful because maybe you're not, it depends, I guess, what seat they're going to be in, right? If like they could have that skill set to code, but you might not need to
it,
use that, right?
100%.
So you're just kind of reading between the lines as to like, what does that really bring to the table?
That's right. And
Yeah.
we've talked about it. I mean, with the growth of large language models, like there is a world in which that just the specific coding language skill set
Yeah.
may not necessarily be as important.
Right.
But I think the ability to learn that language and
Yeah.
implement that language is super important.
For aspiring traders,
Mm.
what does it take to stand out? Because we know it's super competitive.
Yeah.
Everyone hears a name like BlackRock. They want to work there. They want to know how to crack the code. Like, what
Yeah.
makes someone stand out? What advice do you have for somebody who wants to work at BlackRock?
Yeah, okay. That's a good question. I mean, I think that's kind of true for anywhere you go to work, not just unique to BlackRock. But I would say one is just a initiative, like taking initiative, being hungry, wanting to learn. Like, I think all of those things and showing that clearly over time, consistently over time, is a very easy way to stand out, right?
Yeah.
And just taking the extra step. Like, I'll tell you, when I started in the industry, I came in early, left late, was working on projects. I remember my parents, who are immigrants to this country, their tip was like, just be everyone's point person for any problem they have.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
it's not the worst idea.
No, I love that.
It's hard to do,
Yeah.
and I think you want to make sure you direct in the right direction. But I think having initiative, working hard, learning, like don't cheat, like learn the actual fundamentals behind the product that you're
Right.
trying to trade or sell or what have you. Don't skirt around, the rules. Like, just actually be a subject matter expert truly and deeply,
Yeah.
and it'll pay off
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
So those are kind of things that I look for, I'd say. And I think also, like, it sounds crazy, but like being a pleasure to work with
Yes, of
at the
course.
workplace is kind of it, but it kind of gets lost, right? It's
Yeah.
like be energetic,
Yeah.
come in with a smile on your face,
Yeah.
be excited to be there, be part of the team, add to the team culture.
Yeah.
Like, those things
It's not
add.
just about the resume.
Yeah,
Like
exactly right.
that's kind of like, I would assume, any prestigious institution, the resumes are not the problem. You're gonna get qualified
that's right.
people. The hardest part about the hiring
Fit,
is like
culture.
getting the person, exactly,
That's
the
right.
fit and the culture. And I love what you said about, be the problem solver and the
Yeah.
go-to, because, even I try to catch myself even today, doing this for a long time. I'm like, okay, if XYZ is not working, or you're
Yeah.
like kind of at a dead end, it's like, what am I going to do to escalate? I'm not going to like complain to my manager, right?
Right.
I'm going to figure
Fix
out
it.
what, like, this
Yeah.
is what I think the solutions are, the options, and do it.
That's right.
But I think that's a great piece of advice for the next kind of generation trying to prove value
Yeah.
and be a doer, really.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, listen for the problems around you.
Yeah.
Like, just pay attention, and
Right.
you'd be shocked at how much you can help in a very small way.
Right.
Yeah.
Representing the world's largest asset manager, how do you navigate the marketplace differently than others, your competitors? And does being big come with other unique obstacles or advantages even? I
Yeah.
think we could probably think there's probably a lot of obstacles in a large place like BlackRock, but
That's
how's
right.
both sides?
Yeah. So I would say, from kind of the responsibility from sitting at BlackRock is quite high to our clients, right? So from top down, we talk about how our core mission and purpose is to provide for better financial futures for people. And so there's that day in and day out, whether you're trading on behalf of a insurance company or a pension company that's trusted us with their assets, or for an individual who's bought a life path fund in their
Right.
401k. Like, there's a lot of responsibility I think we talk about day in and day out, a fiduciary duty, really, to kind of do the best we can for our clients,
Right.
which means, at least on the trading side, is getting the best outcomes we can, ensuring consistency of access to liquidity and consistency of performance, right? So I think those are things we think about a lot in trading, but also I think across all of BlackRock. It's kind of like the core message we hear every single
Right.
day.
Right.
So that's on kind of the responsibility to our clients. In terms of how we act in the marketplace, I think there is also a big responsibility there to act in a consistent and fair and trustworthy way across all of those asset classes. So we take that very seriously too, because we're large, we also need to make sure we have access
Right.
to liquidity,
Right.
which means partnerships over long periods of time. Every trade isn't just a trade, it's part of a long
Yeah. I love that.
relationship built with our counterparties. We spend a lot of time thinking about counterparty strategy, making sure we have, diversification across counterparties, and that we're always thinking about, again, just making sure we have access to liquidity for our clients
Yeah.
all the time.
All the time.
But there's so much kind of advantage that comes with scale, being able to achieve scale. We're oftentimes front-footed and leaders in kind of achieving electronic change. You know
Yeah.
this, like,
Yeah.
we work on it together. And so it's really cool that we get to do that on behalf of the industry,
Yeah.
always, again, in service of our clients.
You're a leader of a global team. A lot of these skills you've now developed and have to live in your everyday life must pour over to your personal life. And I know we share motherhood, and you've definitely been a sounding board for me when I was coming back after having my first
Yeah.
child. And what's what's prepared you? Like, what have you learned from your personal and professional leading such a big global team? Where are you drawing the kind of similarities or the skill sets that
Yeah.
you have developed now between your personal and professional life?
Yeah. That's a great question. I actually think becoming a mother has taught me so much about patience. No, like I think we probably both agree
Oh,
with that.
yes. I'm still working
And
on it, though. I'm
still,
not that.
no one's ever going to figure that out. But I think it definitely has added to my total absolute amount of patience I
Right.
have, and like empathy and just kind of the ability to kind of connect with people.
Yeah.
For sure, I've gotten a lot better at
Yeah.
that. Um, but I think balancing all the responsibilities we have at home with all the responsibilities we have at work, that also has made me a lot more purposeful about how I use my time. And I'm sure I can be a lot better about it, but I'm much more thoughtful about it now.
Right.
So I'm very, careful with my calendar,
Yeah.
what's on my calendar, what is the time I'm putting into so many different projects that,
Right.
hit across a bunch of different businesses at BlackRock.
Right.
But also like when I'm home, when I get home, being all in with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
phones are away.
Mm.
I can, if I need to, I can go back online later. But like I am all in with the kids. And for those hours from when I get home at 5:45, 6, let's call it, if I don't have an outing,
Mm-hmm.
to when they go to sleep at 9, it is just like family time.
That's so
Dinner
nice.
together, reading. I'm, tiger mom, so a little bit of math,
Yeah.
because you can never start too early.
Yes.
But like I do actually think very carefully about where I use my time
Right.
all the time. I think that's helped a lot.
There has to. I mean, this isn't really a 9 to 5 industry, and
I
definitely,
know.
certainly not a job. We know there's a lot of kind of after work things. There's travel involved,
Yeah.
so I think it's really nice and endearing to hear how much obviously you value your role at home,
Yeah.
which is super important, and
Yeah.
people need to hear that. I think it's getting better for both like both sides, dads,
Yeah.
moms, like. COVID probably, I hate bringing up the COVID thing, but it definitely did probably shift a lot of people's
100%.
perspectives as they got some more of their time back.
Yeah. I think I often get asked like, how do you do it all in that kind of tone? And I always kind of tell people I actually want to pivot that narrative a bit more to like, I'm so lucky to be able to
Yeah.
get to do all of it. And I'm very thoughtful about my time allocation, but I also have a great team of people
Right.
at work and at home that have supported me along the way. I also, one of like the best feedback tips, whatever you want, career advice things I've ever heard was like, your career is not linear.
Right.
Like it is okay to grow linearly, plateau for a bit, and then like have some kind of, jump step even to the next thing. And sometimes that corresponds perfectly with your personal life.
Yeah.
Other times it doesn't, but it's
Right.
all like a balancing act, and you just have to, put some time and energy into it and know
Yeah.
that it won't be perfect.
Yeah.
But everything is can be fixed and
Yeah.
changed and
Right.
evolved over time.
Yeah, it comes in waves, but the reality is like nobody's got the perfect alignment of
No.
every part of their life.
You're all
So
doing the best.
yeah.
We're all doing the best we
Yeah,
can.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
Jenny,
Yes.
to close it out here, what is next for you? What is on your mind?
Yeah. Well, a lot. I'm always thinking about many, many things that we're working on. A lot of them might be a little too like in the weeds, like portfolio trading and treasuries maybe one day, and like a bunch of other things
Yeah.
you and I are working on together. However, I think as a firm, like we see continued kind of client demand across a bunch of new areas of the markets, right? So whether that's private credit, which has seen a significant amount of
Mhm.
increase, India, other parts of Asia. I think those are pretty interesting things that we're kind of always on the lookout for in
Right.
terms of
Keeping a
how do we
pulse.
position for and make sure,
Right.
especially in trading, that we have consistency of access
Right.
and liquidity in those new marketplaces
Right.
all the time. And maybe what's the best part about BlackRock is that we get to be involved in all of these markets
Right.
as we see client demand for them. So, this year, one of the biggest success stories for us has been IBIT, right? The launch of the Bitcoin ETF, driven by client demand.
Mhm.
But again, BlackRock was able to kind of rally together, trading included, to make sure we created, a best-in-class exposure instrument for that market,
Right.
and work on improving that market and access to that market every single day. So
Right.
I'm kind of excited to keep doing that,
Yeah.
as we kind of move into the new year. I feel like there's always new things and new
Right.
markets that people are interested in.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, that's what makes the job fun,
that's
right?
right.
You don't want to do the same thing every day, and having kind of that management touch point, I'm sure you get exposure to everything outside
Yeah,
of your worlds in a
that's right.
meaningful way. So that's exciting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny, for being here today and for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
All right, great.
Thanks. Off the Desk on TradeWeb is available to stream on all major podcast sites, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. You can learn more about our guest, Jenny Zhao, and BlackRock at www.blackrock.com. To learn more about TradeWeb's platform, you can also visit tradeweb.com.